Space was silent. It was a kind of silence that made even the bravest soldier uneasy. Out here, far from Earth, there were no cities, no people, no sound. Only the endless dark, broken by the cold light of distant stars. On the edge of known space, a human listening post floated quietly. It was a lonely station, small compared to the great war fleets of Earth, but its job was important. Listen. Listen for signals, messages, or any sign of life from the unknown. For weeks, the station crew had heard nothing but static, until one night, something changed. It began with a faint whisper. At first, the communication officer thought it was an equipment fault. Just background noise, nothing serious. But the whisper grew louder, shaping into broken words, filled with fear. Please, anyone is there, help us. The officer froze. His hands shook as he boosted the signal. Static roared in his ears, but beneath it, he heard the sound of a desperate voice. Not human. He called his captain immediately. Together, they listened to the signal. The voice was weak, filled with panic. They are coming. We cannot fight them. Please, anyone, we beg you. The room went silent. Every officer on the station stared at the audio feed. They all knew what it meant. This was a distress call. Somewhere out there, an alien race was crying for help. The captain ordered the signal to be tracked. It came from far beyond human borders, from a small, unknown planet. A place so far, most maps did not even mark it. Could it be a trap? One officer asked. Pirates, maybe. Try to lure us, said another. The captain frowned. No one knew, but the voice did not sound like pirates. It sounded broken, like a people who had already lost everything. Again, the voice came through, this time weaker, as if the speaker was dying. They will consume us all. There will be nothing left. Please, hear our cry. Then silence. The signal cut off. For a long time, no one spoke. The crew felt the weight of what they had just heard. A civilization somewhere in the stars was about to be destroyed, begging for anyone to save them. The captain sent the recording to Earth Command. Within hours, the highest councils of humanity gathered. Admirals, generals, and leaders listened to the call again and again. Some argued it was too dangerous. We know nothing of this enemy, they said. We cannot risk our fleets on a trap. Others argued the opposite. If they are truly dying, do we abandon them? What does that say about us? The debate grew fierce. Some believed Earth should stay safe, protect itself, and let others face their own fate. Others believed that when someone cries for help, humanity cannot look away. For centuries, humans had fought wars, survived disasters, and built fleets to defend themselves. But this was different. This was not Earth's war. This was not their enemy. And yet, something about the voice touched them deeply. It was fear. Pure, raw fear. The kind of fear humans understood. Because long ago, humanity had also known what it was like to stand at the edge of extinction. To cry out into the dark and hope someone, anyone, would answer. Now, the question was, would they answer? The Admiral studied the signal's last words. The alien had spoken of them. Who were they? What enemy could bring such terror into another species' voice? Reports from old trade routes spoke of mysterious force, the swarm. A hive mind species that spread across the stars, consuming everything. Worlds vanished overnight. Ships disappeared without trace. Entire civilizations erased. If the cry for help was real, then the swarm had found another victim. And if the swarm was moving closer, how long before they reached human space? One admiral stood and said, if this is the swarm, ignoring this call will not save us. Today it is their planet. Tomorrow it may be ours. The room went quiet. Finally, Earth's leaders gave the order. The war fleets would prepare. Humanity would answer the call. But for the crew of the small listening post, the night was not over. Hours after the meeting, as they reviewed the recording one last time, they noticed something strange. Buried deep in the static, hidden almost too well to hear, was another voice. Not a plea this time, but a warning. Too late, they're already here. The officer who discovered it felt a chill run down his spine. If that was true, then Earth's fleet was not racing to save the survivors. They were flying straight into the jaws of the enemy. And the enemy was waiting. The decision was not easy. In the great chambers of Earth Command, leaders and admirals sat around a long table. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of machines. On the screen before them, the alien distress call played again. Please, anyone, help us, they are coming. The voice cracked with fear. Even though the words were broken, the message was clear. A people were dying. They had nowhere else to turn. One admiral leaned forward. "This could be a trap," he said. "Pirates, or worse. If we send a fleet, we risk thousands of lives." Another shook her head. "Listen to that voice. Does that sound like pirates? That is desperation. That is extinction." The debate grew louder. Some argued for caution, some for action. The politicians wanted proof. The admirals wanted strategy. But among them all was one simple truth. Humanity had heard a cry for help, and humanity remembered its own past. Generations ago, Earth had nearly destroyed itself through war, disease, and famine. Many times, humans had stood on the edge of extinction. Many times, they had cried out, sometimes into the void, sometimes to each other. And always, someone had answered. That memory lived in every human heart. It was the reason Earth now had colonies among the stars. It was the reason their fleets patrolled the void. One general stood and spoke words that silenced the room. If we ignore this call, then what are we? What does it mean to be human if we cannot answer when another cries out? No one argued after that. The order was given. Earth's war fleet would move. Crossed swords, the fleet prepares. Across the Sol system, engines roared to life. Massive carriers, like floating cities of steel, lit up the darkness. Sleek destroyers slid from orbital docks. Troop transports loaded with soldiers began final checks. In training halls, Marines strapped on armored suits, checking weapons and comms. Some were veterans, scarred from past battles. Others were young, nervous, but determined. "Where are we going?" one soldier asked. To answer cry for help, his commander replied, "That's all you need to know." The news spread quickly through the colonies. Some were afraid. Why risk human lives for strangers? But others felt pride. This was who they were. This was what it meant to be human. Even the civilian ships lit candles in their windows. Old Earth tradition for those who sailed into danger. High-voltage doubts and warnings. Not everyone supported the mission. Alien allies sent urgent messages. "Do not go. The swarm cannot be defeated. You will die." But the humans only replied, "Better to die fighting than to turn our backs on those who beg for help." One alien ambassador stared at the humans in disbelief. "Why?" he asked. "Why risk so much for a species you do not know?" The answer was simple. Because we know what it is like to be afraid. And because one day, we may need someone to answer our call. Rocket into the unknown. The fleet assembled near the edge of the system. Hundreds of ships, bristling with weapons, ready for war. At the center was a flagship, Indomitable, its hull shining like a blade against the stars. On its bridge, Admiral Hayes stood tall, eyes fixed on the dark beyond. He gave the order every captain was waiting for. "Set course for the signal. Jump on my mark." A quiet fell over the fleet. Every sailor, every soldier, every officer knew the risks. Many whispered prayers. Others gripped their weapons tighter. Then, with a deep breath, Hayes raised his hand. Mark. Space ripped open in flashes of light. One by one, the ships jumped into hyperspace, vanishing into the void. New moon shadows waiting. But far from Earth, near the planet where the signal had come from, another fleet waited. They were not human. They were not kind. The swarm had already arrived. Their ships were alive, twisted things of bone and metal, grown in darkness. Their minds were one, their hunger endless. They circled the dying planet like vultures, tearing apart its defenses. When the human signal reached them, they listened, and they smiled. Because now, another prey was on the way. The humans did not know. They thought they were going to save a dying race. But in truth, they were flying straight into the jaws of the most feared enemy in the galaxy. And the swarm was ready. The jump through hyperspace ended with a violent shudder. One by one, Earth's warships emerged back into real space. On the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, Admiral Hayes looked out at the planet below. His breath caught in his throat. The world was burning. Cities lay in ruins. Vast scars of fire stretched across continents. Orbit was littered with broken satellites, shattered stations, and a wreckage of ships that had tried and failed to resist. "Report," Hayes ordered. "Planet atmosphere unstable," came the reply. "Energy readings are low. Life signs faint. Very faint." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The distress call had been real. Whoever had cried out was barely holding on. Hayes gave the command without hesitation. Begin search and rescue operations. Marines to the surface. Escorts form a defensive screen. We don't know what's out here. Derelict house, ruins of a civilization. Dropships thundered down to the atmosphere, cutting through clouds of smoke and ash. On the ground, Marines fanned out, weapons ready. What they found made even hardened soldiers fall silent. The city had once been beautiful. Towers of glass and stone, plazas full of statues, parks with rivers running through them. Now it was broken. Buildings lay collapsed. Streets were filled with rubble and scorch marks. But there were survivors. A handful of thin, trembling figures stumbled out from the shadows. Their skin was pale and marked with strange patterns, their eyes wide with terror. They looked at the armored Marines, as if they could not believe what they were seeing. One Marine removed his helmet, crouching down to meet them. "We're here to help," he said softly. "You called." We answered. The aliens collapsed to their knees, tears running down their strange faces. "You came," one whispered. "No one ever comes." Fear of the enemy. The survivors were taken to a secure zone. Doctors worked quickly, giving food, water, and medicine. Slowly, the aliens began to speak. Their words were filled with despair. Their people had been proud, advanced, peaceful. They had built ships, explored nearby systems, traded with neighbors. Then the swarm came. At first, it was only a shadow on their borders. A few missing ships, a few silent colonies. Then entire fleets vanished. Entire worlds disappeared. And when the swarm finally came to their homeworld, nothing could stop them. The survivors described the enemy in shaking voices. They do not speak. They do not feel. They do not bargain. They only eat. They eat everything. Metal, stone, flesh, even the air itself. They leave nothing. Marines exchanged grim looks. Many had thought the swarm was only a rumor, a ghost story told by traitors. But this was real, and it was worse than they imagined. Warning, disturbing discovery. Back in orbit, human ships scanned the system. Strange readings appeared on their sensors. "Admiral," a technician said, "I'm picking up movement. Not on the planet, above it. In orbit." Hayes turned sharply. "Enemy ships?" The officer swallowed. "Yes, sir. They're here, and they've seen us." On the screens, new contact appeared. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Dark shapes slid out from behind the planet's moons and broken stations. Ships unlike anything human eyes had ever seen. They looked alive, their hulls pulsing as if breathing, covering claws and spines. The swarm. They were hiding, Hayes muttered. His heart pounded. The survivors had been right. The enemy never left. They were waiting. A promise kept. On the surface, survivors clung to Marines, terrified as the sky above rumbled with distant thunder. "They are here," one whispered. "We told you it is too late." But the Marines stood firm. "Not while we're here," their commander said. Dropships began rushing civilians to safety, carrying them to human carriers in orbit. Every soldier knew it was dangerous. Every pilot knew the enemy could strike at any moment. And yet, not one turned away. Because Earth had made a promise. If someone cried for help, humanity would answer. Milky Way the calm before the storm. On the Indomitable, Admiral Hayes watched the enemy fleet spread like a dark cloud. His officers looked to him for orders. "Admiral," one said, "do we retreat? There are too many of them." Hayes shook his head. His voice was steady, iron in the face of fear. "No. If we leave now, the survivors die. We can come all this way to run." The room fell silent. Every officer knew what that meant. They were about to fight an enemy no one had ever beaten. Hayes turned toward the massive viewing window, staring into the black void where the swarm gathered. His jaw tightened. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Form defensive lines. Prepare all weapons. Marines, protect the civilians. We hold this world."